first and foremost, thank you guys for just honoring me to be here tonight. I certainly love my job. If the choice was to be here or to spend even a nanosecond with Roger Goodell, I would choose to be here. I would choose to be here or virtually anywhere not to spend time with Roger Goodell. But so tonight, there's a couple of things that I wanted to do. First, to thank you for your program. When Keith and I met, we talked a little bit about our kids and how important we believe youth sports is. As a person who was a little bit of a knucklehead when I was in high school, I owe everything to my high school coach that I still stay in touch with today. It's hard to believe when we say that those coaches in our life were our mentors, because we're talking about men who have probably known us for the balance of our lives. And as we struggle and talk about raising our own kids, we spend a little bit of time here talking about raising our sons. For every person who is raising a son, as I am, my best too. But as we do that, as we try to instill in our girls and our boys the important values of honor, integrity, dedication, teamwork, those are the things that we know are important on the field, and the things that we started to teach our kids. And I was lucky enough to be a youth coach myself. You start teaching young kids about what it means to be a good sport. And those are the things that, as I've grown older, and whether it's the time when I was a prosecutor for over a decade, or whether I've now been in this job for nearly 8 years, and sometimes it feels like dog years. But the importance of being a good sport is something that I think, unfortunately, a whole generation is not learning. And it is our obligation, both as educators, as coaches, and for the men and women, the young men and women who are in this room as youth athletes, it is probably one of the most important lessons that you can carry forward even into your adult life. Why? Because the same lessons that we would teach you when you were first lacing up your cleats or catching your glove or grabbing a ball to hit the court, what it meant to treat your teammates and the other team as equals, what it meant to take upon yourself that there is actually something more important than that individual score, something more important than that individual game, something far more important than an individual win. That people are always going to judge you in the manner with which you played the game. That's something that you learn each and every day. And I can tell you from whether being a prosecutor or working in private practice, it's something that a lot of people have forgotten. So why do I think it's so important to embrace a program that teaches you how to be a leader in the 21st century? Primarily because I firmly believe that for all of you, whether you're still in high school or in college, you have far more challenges today than we did as kids growing up. On the way over here, I was talking to the guy who was driving me, and we were talking about, again, raising our kids. I don't know why I have this conversation with virtually everybody. Perhaps I'm just looking for somebody to be cathartic with me. But we were talking about the fact that, when we grew up here, we had 3 channels to choose from. I know that sounds crazy for everybody who's young, but yes, we had 3. Just 3. But, when I sit there and I'm glad my kids aren't here because I do a great job of embarrassing them. When I try to explain to my son about leadership and what it means not to put certain things on your Twitter page. I do call my son Champ all the time because it prevents me from calling him other names. I didn't have to deal with that when I was a kid. When he is trying to balance and understand the difference between reality and reality TV, I didn't have that as a kid. And so going forward, whether it is things that we have to deal with on the court or on the field, or things that we have to deal with as adults in the boardrooms, That lesson of learning how to be a good sport is what I believe is the one thing that teachers, students, athletes, business people have to embrace. And unfortunately, I also believe it is one of those things that you only can really learn and understand when you're young, and hopefully when you are on the field of competition. And what do I mean? No one in this room would countenance a young person lying to them. Nobody in this room would countenance a young athlete doing something that we would call cheating. Nobody in this room would be okay with us bending the rules in order to win this one game. But all of us as adults, all of us, have been in work situations where we know people have not told the truth to us. We've all been in business situations where someone has bended the rules in order to get an advantage. And all of us have either worked for corporations or dealt with businesses who have done something that simply wasn't the honorable way. Someone told me that there's a person here from Verizon, and I have a tremendous respect for people who are members of unions, because you guys do what we do. We simply fight for what's right. But here's what's the crazy part, and why I think that learning to be a good sport is so important. While we expect all of those things from individual athletes, and you and I expect those things from our sons and daughters, for whatever reason, society continues to give a pass to institutions when it comes to being a good sport. What do I mean? I just got done with the recruiting process for my son. The good news is he's a junior, but when he graduates, he'll be going to the University of Hartford on a lacrosse scholarship. So I certainly, am happy for him for living his dream. But it is a certain part of me that feels a lot of angst knowing that when it comes to the NCAA, and whether it's lacrosse or football or basketball or other sports, we're still dealing with an institution that does a pretty lousy job of graduating our student athletes. I love March Madness like nobody's business, but I can't help but, while I'm enjoying March Madness, not take a peek at looking up the schools who are in the Final Four and taking a look at their graduation rates for their basketball players. It's typically not that good. I have a hard time rooting for guys who are playing college football, wondering if I see a person that gets hurt and knowing if that guy loses his scholarship, is he going to get medical coverage even though he's no longer playing on the team? And whether we're talking about Baylor or talking about Penn State, I want to root for my alma mater just like everybody would want to root for their alma mater, but how many times do you feel a little tinge of shame when you read something about a university that either has not responded to something on campus in the right way or tried to sweep something under the rug? Well, that's because for whatever reason in society, we are willing to hold our athletes to the standard of being a good sport, but for whatever reason, when it comes to being a good sport when you're an institution, we're willing to give you a pass. So I want to wrap up today with why I think that's a problem and what I think the solution is. It's a problem because we can't have a double standard. We can't teach our kids to be great athletes and be in good sports and believe in honor, trust, integrity, duty, and honor, and at the same time try to explain to my son, in that case, of why it's okay if his school makes a decision that they're not going to honor a scholarship. That's tough. But how do I think it's going to get fixed? It frankly is going to get fixed by people who are in this room who are younger than me and younger than you. As adults, as people who have tried to do things to build something better, I think that we can look at a lot of great things that we have done over the last 10 years, but if we're honest with each other, there's a whole generation of us who haven't been able to hold institutions accountable, and that is going to fall on people in this room who are younger than us. So why do I love my job so much as the head of the NFL Players Association? I dig it because it's my job to rely on the leadership of people who are much younger than me. So each and every day, while obviously I'm the guy who's either taking a bullet or giving a bullet to somebody in the National Football League, our leadership, our union leadership, doesn't rise and fall with me. I report to a man named Eric Winston, who is a left tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals. My executive committee includes guys like Richard Sherman and a group of players who have a full-time job of playing football. But at the end of the day, as a 52-year-old lawyer, I report to a guy named Thomas Davis. I report to Richard Sherman. I report to Sean Sweesum. I report to Benjamin Watson. I report to a group of players who have taken it upon themselves to make decisions as a group of leaders, generally for a whole generation of players that they will never meet. So just to frame that and why I know that they understand the importance of being a good sport and believing in making leadership decisions for the future, let me just finish with one quick story that frames everything. 2008, the leader of this organization that I had was a man named Gene Upshaw. Gene went into the hospital on a Wednesday and died on a Sunday. So on that Monday, the executive committee met, and back then it was a group of men: Drew Brees, Mike Vrabel, Brian Dawkins. I mean, not only guys who were fantastic players, but you mentioned those names, and those were players that we would want our sons and daughters to emulate. And the problem for that group of young men, who averaged about 27 years old, was that they got together within a few days and were tasked with the job of finding the next executive director to replace a guy who had had the job for 26 years. A group of people who were 27 years old took upon themselves, thrust upon themselves the job of finding an executive director who had had the job as long as, if not longer than they had been alive. And on the other side, they were facing 32 billionaires who had owned the teams for decades. So there is never a day where I don't believe in the power of a group of athletes to take it upon themselves to not only be a good sport, but to be great leaders. And so today, as you celebrate the triumphs and the accolades of both coaches and players, I know that you guys have learned the importance of being a good sport. But I hope that all of you are willing to take it to the next level, to hold people accountable when they need to be accountable, to be tremendous leaders, and to take it upon yourself to teach a new generation of people who will come behind you. I get to do that every day, and my hope, and I firmly believe this, is that somebody in this room decides one day that they want to take this job. And please take it from me. So it is again a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. Thank you for the wonderful invitation. Thank you for the love that you have for students and for you parents who fight with me in this wonderful battle of raising your own kids. I just want to say thank you for not only what you do for your own families, but what you've decided to do to make our communities better. Thanks a lot.
This award, thank you. Tony, Mr. White, take this. Come on.
You want to talk?
Yeah. Sure. Mr. Smith will take a few questions if you have them. It's not often that we have the executive director of the NFLPA, so he's graciously allowed us a few moments. If you have any questions, please just stand, and he is more than welcome to, more than willing to answer any questions, including about the gentleman up north that wears number 12. It's okay. He said it's okay.
It's okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, thank you for coming, Mr. Smith. I really appreciate it. In terms of when you became the leader of the NFL Players Association, it's two questions. One, what was your strength that helped you come into a situation such as yourself when you're trying to come behind a successor? And because you weren't known point, he was a former athlete.
Yep.
So you're seen as an outsider, and you have to go with your strengths. What were some of the strengths that helped you get the confidence of those people to be a leader for yourself? And then, what surprised you that you didn't expect? And how did you?
Great question. You know, to be dead honest, the first strength, prayer. I come from a long line of Baptist preachers. I was the one person in the family who did not go into the ministry, so I leave you to form your own conclusions. But you know, the biggest strength, you know, after that, I think, was a decision that was counterintuitive, to go out and meet every NFL player twice within that 3-month season. So, you know, you come into a business and your first thought is, okay, you know, we have a staff of about 160 people. You know, you're sort of trained from business to, okay, get the office in order, make sure we have a 30-day plan, make sure we have a 60-day plan. And Brian Dawkins was the guy that said, forget about the office, go meet the men. And really it was that decision of, I hit all 32 teams twice from August until December. I never want to do it again because I think it just about cost me everything. I was 6'2" when I took the job. But that was that strength of coming in and really saying, hey, look, I know nothing about football, nothing. And if you ask my high school football coach, he would tell you I know nothing about football. But I do know about how to put a team together and how to know when a fight's coming and how to prepare for it. And that was that one thing, I think, that probably the only affinity I had with NFL players. You know, for everybody who's been in a locker room, I was never a big rah-rah guy. And I know we watch a lot of movies and films about what it's like in an NFL locker room. I can tell you, the quietest place on earth, frankly, is an NFL locker room. I mean, there's no screaming, there's no yelling. I know we've seen all these movies where they're flipping over tables and smashing stuff. These guys play at the highest level. And the only thing they want to know is, what's the plan and can we execute it? And so that was really the thing, I think, that was my greatest strength going in. My greatest surprise, these guys are really big. I mean, like really big. And so there was a time when I went down to the Pro Bowl that first year, and it was going to be really the last Pro Bowl before we headed into the lockout. And I was there on the sidelines, and I wanted to get a chance to kind of grab a couple Pro Bowl players because, you know, you just have to connect. While they are our core leadership, you just have to connect with a few of these guys, right? And so I remember kind of pulling Peyton to the side and kind of explaining to him what I was about and what we're going to go through. And I was kind of catching guys as they were coming onto the field. So practice ends. For Pro Bowl practice ends. And I mean, it's every NFL player I've grown up watching, right? And I'm sitting there, and Kevin Mawai, who was our president of the union at that time, 17-year, 11-time Pro Bowl center, starts waving to me to come out onto the field after practice is over to talk to the guys. And he's like, "Come on, D, come on out." My first reaction was, come on out. So I came out, and Kevin says, "Hey, look, I'm the president of this union, and it's about time that all you guys get your head around who our new leader is. D, come into the huddle." And you talk about the greatest surprise. Yes, it was a thrill, but the greatest surprise was when I got into the middle of that huddle, you couldn't see the sun. I mean, I'm like 4'4". I'm Webster on the inside of this thing. And I started talking to these guys about how important it is for us to stick together and what it means to be a team. And no, I'm not Gene, and Gene's gone. But what Gene would want every man in this huddle to do is to remember that we're fighting not only for former players and current players, but we're fighting for a generation of players, and we got to stick together. and we get done, and Kevin grabs me, and he's what, 6'4" himself, so he's got his hand literally on the back of my head. And he goes, "Hey man, D, break down the huddle for us." I have no idea what that means, by the way. So he says, "Break down this huddle." All right, let's do it. And that was it. And I walked away. That was the end. So the guys were sort of like, this is what you get when you invite the lawyer to the huddle. But I look back over almost 8 years now, and tons of surprises. But I think the important thing, and I think one lesson that I learned, whether it was running track in college, but it's all about preparation of employees and execution, right? And so while there's a bunch of things that I would never want to do again, I've loved every day of this job. I dig it. I do. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming, by the way.
That's my pleasure.
But coming, especially from Gene Upshaw, I'm an Oakland Raider fan.
Sorry. Yeah. Hey, you know what? This year's your year. I say that to everybody, by the way. Saints, it's your year.
Everybody's undefeated right now.
Absolutely.
But in coming in and dealing with, did you have to go through a very big paradigm shift, especially from that way of thinking into the upcomers coming in? How did you really kind of approach that? Because there's a lot of old mindsets.
Still are. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, it was a learning curve. I think to piggyback on what he said, probably one of the greatest surprises that I had coming into the job is you assume coming into the National Football League, you're kind of walking into a big corporation. And in our case, I mean, look, we'll generate $12.8 billion next year. It doesn't run like a corporation. It is probably one of the most dysfunctionally operating businesses that I've ever been around. They really don't have a board of directors the way we think of a board of directors. If you think back to old civics or old world history, the league really sort of operates like feudal kingdoms, and every team is their own feudal kingdom, and some kingdoms are more powerful than the others. And Roger sort of floats around like this sort of Prince Valiant that kind of protects all the feudal kingdoms, and he's not a CEO. So, the tough part about the job and dealing with old mindsets is, you come in thinking it's going to run one way, it doesn't. And then how do I put this delicately? You deal with some owners who think in a very old way. And I'm not that guy. I don't know whether they were expecting someone who was a little more docile and a little less aggressive, but nobody pays me to be nice. And as a group of players, we believe that we are primarily responsible for generating that 12.6 billion. And so, one of our players tweeted to me earlier today some comment by somebody on TV, and I guess he was going after me, no surprise, that it was my job to ingratiate myself with the commissioner. I looked over my contract and I didn't see the word ingratiate. So if we can get things done by working together, that's great. If we can't, everybody's got to buckle up and pack a lunch. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
Since there's still going to be a whole lot of old mindsets, and don't want to change for the better, and sometimes change is good, especially in a big organization as the NFL. How would you and the players try to change their mind and look at it at maybe your point of view, or try to come to a compromise?
Yeah, and look, our job is compromise, but I don't start off with compromise. I mean, if you start in the middle, then you're going to end up on their side. Take for example, two-a-day practices. I mean, every coach, you know, everybody who has played football, you say the word two-a-day practices, and like you just feel that little chill go up your back of, oh, right? We don't have two-a-day practices anymore because when we sat down with our neurologist and our neuroscientist, they told us if we cut out one contact practice, in 1 year, we would cut out something like 30,000 head-to-head contacts. So, you know, so the idea is, well, wait a minute. We can sit down with the league and try to explain to them why two-a-days make no sense. I'm fine with a one contact practice, but two-a-day practices, once you look at the injury chart, amazingly, everybody got hurt in the second practice. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? But when we sat down with them and tried to explain that, they got what you would expect. D, we've been having two-a-day practices since Newt Rockne. I don't know who Newt Rockne is, but I know he's not playing today. So, so why aren't we thinking a little bit better about how to get more out of our players but with less contact? And if we have the opportunity to cut down over thousands of head-to-head contacts, why shouldn't really the onus be on you to try to prove to us why that second practice is so important? And we tried to reach a compromise. But you know how we reached a compromise? All the guys that I mentioned in the room said, we're not going to play if we do two-a-days. So that's how we don't have two-a-days anymore. So, you know, I always try, and we always try to reach a compromise on things, but we didn't have neutral sideline concussion experts. We didn't have a concussion protocol. We didn't have mandatory return to plays. A referee wasn't able to even stop a game for a player who had a concussion until last year. That's crazy, right?
Right.
So you try to reach compromise, but if you can't reach compromise every now and then, and you know, I'd love to hear from folks who walked a picket line like Verizon, every now and then, you got to draw a line in the sand and make a decision that you're not going to cross. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I want to go back to something you said when you first started speaking. You mentioned that when you were in high school, you were a bit of a knucklehead, not to bring up a short
Yeah,
story, but,
yeah, a bit. You probably just take out bit.
But when,
yeah.
for the young people who are about to graduate and move on to college, some are playing sports in
Yeah.
college, some are not. But when did it click for you that this like thing is real?
Yeah,
I get one shot at it. When
Yeah.
does it click so that the knucklehead goes to
Right.
the background and the aspiring
the
lawyer?
on the way to being mature pops in.
Yeah.
Well, if you ask my wife, she would say it's never clicked in. But you know, that my 8th grade year, I flunked whatever it was, algebra or calculus 2. Flunked it. And why? Well, because I didn't do the homework and I didn't go to class. I mean, other than those two things, I was all over it. And I remember spending that entire summer, you know, taking algebra 2. And my coach came along, and that was really the first time that somebody sort of framed it up for me. And his stuff, you know, it wasn't a speech because, again, after talking to my son, no one speech is gonna, you know. His thing was, what kind of student do you want to be? What kind of athlete do you want to be? And it took me a long time to kind of figure out what he was talking about, because I thought, well, you know, I want to just get done with high school and I want to be a really good football player. It took me until probably my 11th, 12th grade year that he was really asking me a really simple question: what kind of man do I want to be? And at the end, his frame was always, men handle their business. And if you can't handle algebra 2, you can't be an athlete. And if you can't be an athlete, you can't, in balanced school, you can't graduate. And so that was when it just started to click. And I wish I would, you know, be able to say that, you know, I sailed through with great grades and I went to class every day after that. But no. But that was probably the first time that someone challenged
me for what it truly means to take responsibility. And so, you know, every now and then I get a little crossways with our players because that's the way I engage our players. I hate the fact that 1 out of every 6 players goes bankrupt. That's embarrassing. And that is just a failure of responsibility. It has nothing to do with not taking advantage of a program or not taking advantage of a financial advisor or any of that. We provide our players with more resources than they ever had. But after 8 years, I now realize that if the man sitting in front of me isn't willing to take responsibility himself, there is nothing I can do to feed him. Mike Vrabel used to have this line of, I can help you, but I cannot save you. And so for us, and it's tough sometimes because, I mean, look, our guys come into this business, and I know you guys love watching them on TV. Our guys come into the biggest business of sport. It's their first job. It's their first job. They've never waited a table. They have almost never had a paper route. They never worked at a restaurant. Why? Because they have played Pop Warner football or high school football or gone to Nike camps or Under Armour camps from the time that they were 8 years old. All they've done is play football. And then they get to the National Football League and somebody gives you, nobody next year will make less than $480,000. That's our minimum. But you get it in 16 checks. 16 checks. So a young guy is forced with, how in the world do I budget an entire year off of 16 checks? And I feel sorry for him, but this is what it means to handle your business. And for some of them, they got the message late, and I make sure they get it from me, because I wouldn't be doing my job.
Thank you again.
Awesome, guys. Thank you.